We are back with the Summit of Champions Winter Invitational, of course. Now having, Wolfe against Marco, a matchup that we are used to seeing from like regionals finals. We saw it at like EUIC very, very late in the tournament. It's a little bit different this time around because now this is already a match for elimination. And only one of them can stay alive in this tournament, as both of them have lost their first round. So what does that tell us about the quality of this tournament?
It's so scary, yeah. I think, these like super small tournaments are really interesting, right? Because you get the chance to see just such high quality matches, but every match really does matter because you're only playing I think 3-4 games total maybe, and so I'm particularly excited for this one because I think Marco's using kind of like the classic balance that's really running around right now in this format. These Pokemon were very common with each other in the previous time we had this regulation as well. Often you would see like Landorus on the composition, but it's very, very good. We've got Marco using this like new super annoying Thunderous-esque Flutter Mane, and Wolfe is running kind of this Tornadus Tailwind hyper offense team. And I think it's actually has some Pokemon that match up really well into Marco's team, specifically like Glamora, as well as Landorus Therian. Both like are used in this format, but not like I think super high in terms of overall usage rates. And but I think like they're actually very well placed in the meta right now, given the prevalence of these balanced teams.
Yeah, I mean, you already mentioned it, so let's have a quick look at our players and their teams. It seemed like Glamora might have a good matchup into what Alex was bringing, but of course Golden Go was really, I think, one of the key annoying Pokemon there for Wolfe, who I think couldn't really execute his main strategy in that set against Alex. Now, though, looking at Marco's team, do you expect the Glamora to kind of make an even bigger impact than it did in the set against Alex?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because if you're Marco, your team indexes mainly on either like getting Fake Out plus a really good attack off. I mean, the Flutter Mane is actually really fascinating, especially because it's running Pain Split. That's like this new tech that feels like it's popped up. I didn't see it until like people mentioned it, I think either a week or 2 weeks ago. It's like, hey, some of these high level players on Showdown Ladder are using Pain Split Flutter Mane, but it's Taunt, T-Wave, Pain Split, and Moonblast, right? So it's like super bulky. And so normally like Flutter Mane just goes down very easily, but I wouldn't be surprised if it can survive an attack from most of the Pokemon from Wolfe's end. And so if you're able to survive even with just a slurve of HP and then get the Pain Split off, it can be really annoying to deal with. But Wolfe, of course, does have a ton of offense from his end. And of course, once again, the Glamora and Landorus, I think, are two key Pokemon to pay attention to in this matchup specifically.
Yeah, I think they really got to show that in the second game against Alex, where once Wolfe was able to position them next to each other due to their kind of unique offensive typing and the coverage that they have against these more balancy type Pokemon. It was just very, very strong, and Alex lost that game even though he was up, 4-2? I think this could be the goal also, again, for Wolfe to set up these offensive powerhouses, preferably under Tailwind, though. Tornadus, on the other hand, I think is also a Pokemon that can do really well against balance. At least it kind of forces their hand, because if we have a look over on Marco's team, we will see that there are actually quite a lot of Pokemon that don't like going up against Tornadus, but equally there are a couple of Pokemon that do like going up against it. So I think Marco will probably be forced to maybe lead off with a Chien-Pao, maybe bring in the Raging Bolt, just so that he has some tools against this Tornadus.
Yeah, definitely. I was thinking Raging Bolt was one of the main Pokemon to look out to if you're on Marco's end. Part of the reason for it is because, like, if it is able to get a Calm Mind off, that combination of Calm Mind plus Fairy Terra means that you actually can't do a ton of damage from Wolfe's end other than the Landorus, right? It's, of course, a +1 Sludge Bomb from a Glamora would also be able to deal decent damage, but Calm Mind plus the leftovers Raging Bolt was like the default set on Raging Bolt the previous time we played this format. I feel like recently, and Marcus, I'm curious if like this matches what you've seen. Like, I've seen a lot of people actually move away from Calm Mind and use Assault Vest, but there's a reason why Calm Mind was so good when we had this format the first time around.
Yeah, I actually used the Calm Mind variant in the last Victory Road tour, and was like, it was the first time that I think I brought it to a tournament, and I was like really just surprised like by how good it was, even when your opponent had a plan. And I think like every one of my matches, it felt like, okay, my opponent was ready to take on this team, but the team is just so strong that even if your opponent has a plan, like you can still, play for a win, like out of most positions. Yeah, I think Assault Vest, maybe against Wolf's team in particular, maybe Assault Vest would match up a little bit better into it, actually, because, yeah, Wolf's team is built in a way that it doesn't really give you the time to set up a couple of call mines. Yeah, I mean, we talked about the Qian Pao. I think the Flutter Mane, though, over on Marco's side, maybe that's the one Pokemon where I would be, like, surprised if it was, like, the focus of his game plan.
All right, we're going to get started here, and it's going to be Chien-Pao Urshifu from Marco's end against the Landorus plus the Water Ogerpon. So, of course, getting an Intimidate off to start the game, always quite nice. Having your Water Ogerpon out against Urshifu, also quite nice because it just threatens redirecting the Surging Strikes away. Marco getting an Intimidate off, I think, also quite a big deal onto the Chien-Pao because it means that you don't have to be as worried, of course, of its Ice-type attacks. But yeah, I think the key thing here is that Ogerpon is quite nicely positioned, right? Like, you see Wolf considering switching out and then just going for damage here onto Chien-Pao, saying, I've intimidated both of you. The best you could do to damage Ogerpon would be like a close combat plus an Ice Skull Crash, but with Intimidate, not sure that even gets the knockout. And so Marco recognizing, hey, you already intimidated me. Chien-Pao's not doing too much here because you can redirect me away. Let me bring out my own Intimidate.
Yeah, what is quite interesting about the setup from Wolf is the fact that there is no Tornadus after all. I mean, I talked quite a bit about it in team preview, but yeah, it's one of those Pokemon that is really forcing out your opponent to kind of react to it in certain ways just because of yeah, how much impact it can have on the battle, both with Tailwind, but then also with Bleak Wind Storms. So yeah, Marco kind of feeling forced, I guess, to lead off with his Chien-Pao, but yeah, both players managing to kind of reposition from there. But I really like the switch in from Wolf because, yeah, Flutter Mane is a perfect Pokemon to have now on the field against this Urshifu and Incineroar.
Yeah, and I think the main thing here is that Marco is just generally at a speed disadvantage throughout the course of this set, and Water Ogerpon is, like, awesome, both as a redirector as well as a potential damage dealer, and so, like you said, Flutter Mane so well positioned right now, right? There's not much that can help get around the just power of its Moonblast here, and so Glimmora now switching in as well. Marco recycling, trying to, you know, pivot out Incineroar immediately. Doesn't want to eat up an attack from Landorus. Ends up being Rillaboom switching in here. But feels like Wolf is just constantly applying offensive pressure, and like Marco's trying to react to it.
Yeah, now the question is, of course, did Marco kind of call the bluff here? And is he going to attack, even though there was a threat of a follow me coming in from this Ogerpon? Wolf decided to not go for it, but instead try to advance his positioning further by switching in Glimmora. Instead, it's just going to be Moonblast, but perfect Terrestrialization into Steel.
Oh my gosh. That was, yeah, an insanely risky turn from Marco's end, like you said, because you know, there's the threat from Wolf's end, but the Steel Terra also showing like why you want to consider using Steel Terra in this format, right? Being able to survive that Moonblast comfortably. Of course, people sometimes like use a more offensive Terra like Water or Stellar, which would not really help against like a potential Fairy Terra specs Moonblast there, but it is the perfect turn for Marco there, as now you've also pivoted Rillaboom, so you have Fake Out Pressure once more, but great call there. And to get the knockout onto Flutter Mane, I think is a huge deal here.
Yeah, amazing call there by Marco, and at the highest level, it will come down to calls like that, going for Surging Strikes, even though you're facing down a Ogerpon Wellspring. And, I mean, it isn't over. Now that Urshifu has Terrestrialized into Steel, of course, it will be weak to Earth Power coming out from Glimmora, but yeah, definitely a huge win there for Marco in this previous turn, and yeah, Wolf already has to kind of scramble a little bit, because Flutter Mane, it was in such a dominant position, but now Wolf didn't capitalize at all, lost Flutter Mane for almost nothing, and yeah, Urshifu, supported by Fake Out, can go for just another hit now.
And it's just Fake Out, no Terra here. Surging Strikes into the Glimmora, outspeeding Glimmora as well. I mean, it's an amazing turn for Marco, right? Like, you're able to just get a knockout here. I think you can see Wolf was considering going for the Dragon Terra with Glimmora. The problem there is if you end up Dragon Terraing, you become weak to the Chien-Pao in the back, right? And then so Chien-Pao being able to Ice Skull Crash a Dragon Terra Glimmora as well as a Landorus is so threatening. But Marco's Urshifu has been insane this game, right? It's gotten basically a one-hit knockout, right? But, you know, 2/3 hit knockout technically onto both the Flutter Mane and the Glimmora. And it feels like Marco is just in such good control of this game right now.
Yeah, and I mean, at the same time, like, this kind of game shows why, like, Urshifu is still so dominant despite Pokemon like Ogerpon Wellspring being around. Just because of, yeah, like, positioning Fake Out next to it, using the kind of the pressure, understanding where the pressure lies, and then going for some reads like Marco did, really showing that, yeah, Urshifu can come out on top over Pokemon like Ogerpon Wellspring. And at the same time, it kind of also shows that you have to use Pokemon like Ogerpon Wellspring because of how strong Urshifu is. Now, with the Toxic Debris, I mean, one small win for Wolfe, there are Toxic Spikes up, so
Ooh.
there's a little bit of damage coming into this Incineroar for sure, but what a play there now coming out from Wolfe.
Yeah, I was gonna say I reacted that way because we saw the Ivy Cudgel stomping lock-in into the what was the Rillaboom slot, so perfectly predicting this turn specifically, right? And so Marco gets the Intimidate off, but Incineroar does manage to hang on with just a sliver. A knockout there would have been huge. Like now you have to deal with either a Fake Out or Incineroar even cycling out and back in for another Intimidate.
Yeah, and maybe it's one of those kind of turns where even like the worst case scenario, which is kind of what we saw here for Marco, getting hard red with Ivy Cudgel and Stomping, like even then, it's like still okay because you can go for Fake Out and another Surging Strikes the following turn.
So the flinch comes out. Stomping, outspeeding Urshifu. Does this get the knockout with the Intimidate? It does not. So like you said then, Marcus, I think it was actually, super safe play given that you were going to survive that as long as you guarantee that Intimidate. This Urshifu has literally knocked out every single Pokemon so far on Wolfe's end.
Well, it's going to be tough to knock out the Ogerpon, but I guess, well, it could still happen. Really fantastic game.
If you told me coming into this game that Ogerpon would be out on the field or it would be brought into a battle, but Urshifu was still going to get a knockout onto everything with Surging Strikes, I would have been like, that's crazy. But somehow Marco had pulled it off.
Yeah, somehow here we are, and now, now can switch into Rillaboom probably. Go for some more attacks with Fake Out and Close Combat, and then, the game is going to be over. And wow, just like that, Marco turning the game around. We were saying, or well, mainly I was saying, with a Flutter Mane and Ogerpon, a really, really powerful spot there for Wolfe, but Marco with the Terra Steel read, and it's going to be the same Urshifu that has inflicted so much damage on Wolfe that will go on with another Close Combat, and just one more turn, and this battle should be over.
I think it goes to show why Fake Out's so good next to Urshifu, right? It's like, hey, I get to flinch your Ogerpon guaranteed, which means then you can't follow me, and then you can't protect in front of Urshifu. So then as long as I make sure Ogerpon doesn't get the follow me off, then I can just Surging Strikes whatever is next to it, right? And so I think Wolfe has some potential counterplay in the defensive Terra, in like Glimmora, for example, with Dragon. So I think that could have been a key Terra in this game because we didn't end up really seeing a Terra come out. Ivy Cudgel ends up getting, knocking out the Urshifu, but Urshifu's really done its damage. And to me, the key turn was when the Flutter Mane just went down to a Surging Strikes immediately. Because I also think like Chien-Pao is a pretty good late game win con from Marco's end. Flutter Mane at least like threatens it for damage. But with Flutter Mane going down, the Chien-Pao then just like outpaces everything on Wolfe's end for sure. Which I think is really scary, especially with no Tailwind support from Tornadus.
Yeah, and just like that, Marco takes home game one. Now, of course, the question we love to ask after a game like this, after game one, is, of course, what can Wolfey do? Maybe the Tornadus, could that be the kind of approach? Or is it just about maybe making, just landing the calls a little bit better against the Urshifu? What do you think?
Feels like a mix of both. Like I feel like the Ogerpon should make it like you have pretty good protection into the Urshifu. But I think like Marco just made one really incredible play and then just like gained so much momentum from it. I also was thinking like, Terra wasn't super relevant for Wolfe from that previous game, so good defensive Terra could play a big role. If you're able to bait out the Steel Terra from Urshifu, then of course it is weak to some attacks like Landorus's ground type attacks, as well as the Urshifu from Wolfe's end as well, and even Earth Power from Glimmora. And so, I think it's like you got to just have Ogerpon out on the field at the right time, and then maybe just leading into playing safe with it a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's a good call. But playing safe is of course so much easier said than done, especially against a player like Marco, who has shown us now that he is willing to go for those hard reads. Even though Wolfe kind of could answer or could reply with a hard read of himself, going for that double target there, getting that correct, but then not getting the KO, that must really feel bad for Wolfe in that second game. And I'm sure that he'll do anything he can to come back into the series in that second game.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things is the lack of Flutter Mane and Raging Bolt. Like, we had talked about both of those a good bit before the game, but in the end, it's the classic instant Rilla Ursh +1, the one, of course, being the Chien-Pao. And so I think, like, fundamentally, if you go with those four, it's, well, first of all physical attackers, right? And second of all, like, you do have to face the threat of Ogerpon. And so, like, for Urshifu to have done as much as it did, honestly, was really impressive in that previous one. And I'm also curious if you're Marco, like, do you think you can get away with this once again, right? Because, like, Wolf's probably like, I'm not going to let you just sweep me with your Urshifu once again. And I was thinking, like, Raging Bolt could be a decent bring into this one. One of the questions I have is, if you're Wolf, do you consider bringing your Urshifu to threaten close combat onto a Steel Terra Water Urshifu from Marco's end?
Yeah, I mean, it is really a very, very old tale as well in VGC at the highest level. Well, are you going to kind of go for the adaptation to kind of beat what your opponent has just shown you, or are you going to kind of expect and adapt and kind of make a read as to what your opponent could bring and then counter that? And I think, like, bringing out the Raging Bolt would definitely feel like that a little bit, just because of you don't want to bring Raging Bolt into like a Landorus, into Flutter Mane. Even Glimmora, of course, with the toxic debris can be a little bit painful for Raging Bolt. So yeah, it would be a really, really hard commit, and I'm not sure if Marco would have to go for something like that, just based on how well the game one kind of went for him. So I wouldn't be surprised if we saw the same kind of Chien-Pao and Urshifu-centric game plan with a double fake out from Marco.
Yeah, definitely. I think the other question then I have is, can you get around fake out and surging strikes, right? I think part of the problem for Wolf in that previous game was that everything was getting one shot by surging strikes, and that feels really tough, right? Because it means that you just don't have a safe play around fake out plus surging. It's kind of tough because, like, looking at the Terras that Wolf has on his team, it's Fairy Terra Flutter Mane, so you're still falling to surging there. Flying Terra Landorus allows you to survive, as does Dragon Terra on Glimmora, right? So
yeah,
to me, it's like, if you have Water Ogerpon plus either Glimmora or Landorus out, then the combination of those means even if one of them is getting, or the Ogerpon's getting hit by fake out, you can at least, like, Dragon Terra Glimmora or Flying Terra Landorus, and then be able to survive the surging strikes and retaliate back. The question then is that trade-off worth it, right? Because if you commit Terra to those, it means that the Chien-Pao is really happy, because it's like, hey, you've either committed Terra to, Glimmora, and now it's weak to ice, or Landorus is, always going to be weak to ice regardless, so it means you can't defensively Terra anything else, right? And so to me, it's like, it felt like Wolf, was trying to figure out when to Terra in that previous game, never really had a good opportunity to, and part of it is probably the fear of, hey, if I go for a Terra now, it doesn't work out this turn, I might actually lose a lot to Chien-Pao in the late game.
Yeah, but now it is time. Wolf, they're fighting his elimination of the tournament, has to win this game and the next to stay alive in the Winter Invitational, and will bring out the same lead once more. The Ogerpon and the Landorus, maybe kind of expecting another Chien-Pao lead, because I think the lead was actually quite fine for Wolf. But it's Marco who makes an adaptation here and brings in Incineroar right away, and I like this quite a lot for Marco already.
Yeah, it's interesting because you can see what Wolf's opting for. He's going to switch out. He's going to go for Flying Terra. He's going to Terra last Urshifu. If you are Marco, like, you could, of course, go for fake out onto either slot. You could fake out into the Ogerpon, Steel Terra your Urshifu, get a Surging Strikes off into Landorus. I think if you're Wolf, you're actually probably okay with that overall, but it's actually going to be Incineroar pivoting out here. So does Urshifu just go for a Protect this time around? Rillaboom able to pivot in. Now pressures with fake out once again. The subsequent turn, we already know it's going to be Terra Blast into Urshifu. So does Urshifu end up going for a Terra or a Protect?
Yeah, Marco, they're also going for the same kind of high-level play, switching out the active Fake Out into another active Fake Out, so he has it active for the next turn. But this, of course, gives Wolf a great opportunity to go on the offensive with this Terra Blast. However, it seems like that is going to be blocked once more by the Terra Steel over on Marco's side.
So I think overall, this is a great turn for Marco, right? You end up baiting out the Terra from Landers. And this is what I was saying, right? Like, at least this allows you to survive for a turn. But now like, the combination of Chien-Pao plus Urshifu, I think, is looking really, really scary here. That Terra Blast barely dents Urshifu there, even with the Life Orb. And now it's just a Surging Strikes in return. And I'm honestly curious, like, this might just put Landers in, like, a Fake Out KO range the subsequent turn. And if so, you just thread in Fake Out plus Surging Strikes. And, 1 HP.
Yeah, the 1 HP is gonna help, but yeah, as you said, there's a couple of priority on the board right now for Marco as well. The Aqua Jet, which would go through a Protect, and then also, of course, Grassy Glide to hit anything that could come in. And yeah, this is looking pretty tough once more. I mean, this time the read or I guess it's a similar read like in the first game, going for this Terra Steel on the Urshifu and it's just exploiting this weakness over on Wolfey's team that, yeah, Urshifu paired up with Fake Out is just really, really problematic if you only have this one resistance to, or immunity even, to water type attacks, but everything else on your team cannot take Surging Strikes.
And it's actually just the Aqua Jet there, so I think Wolfe was hoping for, hey, you want to Surging Strikes into my Glimmora, and so ends up bringing out the Ogerpon trying to soak up that Surging Strikes, but Marco calls it, guarantees the knockout there onto the Landers, and ends up just being a Wood Hammer here as well. That's so much damage into the Ogerpon, almost just gets the one-hit knockout. It feels like Marco is just really taking full command of this game, and some really, really great calls, not getting baited into the potential Ogerpon switch in there.
Yeah, that was a big play there, and just like that, it's gonna be. I mean, it's gonna be tough here to come up with a way to even bring this back from this range, just because, yeah, Ogerpon now being under threat of a Grassy Glide potentially. Urshifu, I mean, you could opt into these potential speed tie, and I guess seeing that there's a Mystic Water over on Marco's side. You can maybe expect your Urshifu to be faster.
Yeah.
So maybe that's kind of the way to go then.
So let's see, I was going to say, this is a big turn because Wolfe did bring the Urshifu, does manage to move first with it, so you do get a big knockout with that close combat. The question is it enough, right? Like, I think if you're Wolfe, you kind of have to go for the follow me close combat play. Marco can respond here, get a knockout onto the Ogerpon, and suddenly Wolfe is stuck with an Urshifu that can't Terra in the remainder of this game, and it's also dropped its defense, right? And so Ogerpon ends up fainting here. And this is what I was saying earlier coming into this game, where it's like, who do you end up terroring? Because by Kevin committed the flying Terra to Landorus, now it's like there's no defensive Terras really available.
Yep.
Chien-Pao is looking really scary to me, right? Because it just kind of guarantees knockouts here. Granted, it has to connect, and I think we actually saw some misses with it earlier, but it does also have Sacred Sword, so it's a way to hit with accuracy. And it indeed is going to be Chien-Pao coming out here. And now I think it's just such a big offensive threat, since this is Choice Band Urshifu, can't commit to Sucker Punch. Chien-Pao, yeah, just, you know, you can probably just like Grassy Glide, Sacred Sword, double up onto the Urshifu if you, and get that knockout.
Yeah, great call, and that is, I think, exactly what we will see. It just goes to show really how Wolfe's team is kind of designed to just really operate under Tailwind. And yeah, if you cannot get that Tailwind up, again, Tornado is not being brought to this battle at all. And then, yeah, you just lack the speed against this team from Marco that just forgoes speed control entirely because of how many great ways you have with priority moves. With Fake Out, of course, also buying you extra turns, but then, as we just saw, the Grassy Glide taking a couple of crucial KOs here, and yeah, just like that, it seems like Marco will knock out Wolfe and eliminate our first player from this tournament.
Yeah, we'll see. You know, Glimmora at least manages to go for the Protect, right? And so with the Spiky Shield, you actually do end up eating recoil damage with both. It does break the Chien-Pao's Focus Sash. You can see Marco just going for Sacred Sword there. I mean, if Glimmora gets a double here, is there any chance? Nah.
I mean, I mean, you can, like, what is more likely? Your opponent messing up or Icicle Crash just missing? I mean, of course, yeah, we shouldn't call that it's over until it is actually over. So, yeah, maybe there still is a way for Wolfe to come back into this.
It is, of course, very tricky, though, with 3 Pokemon still on Marco's end. But yeah, going for the Spiky Shield the previous turn, I think, yeah, definitely the right call. And Marco actually ends up going for Sacred Sword.
Yep.
Not wanting to miss. Glimmora does manage to tank that decently well. It's not going to be a 2-hit knockout onto it. And it is going to get the knockout onto the Rillaboom. Okay.
Yeah, I think the Toxic Spikes just being set up just a little bit too late. Now, there are some teams that really try to use Glimmora to set up Toxic Spikes, which also... I mean, if you look at Marco's team, like, there's nothing on his team that can absorb them. And, yeah, it's just, yeah, really painful for a balanced player to have these Toxic Spikes on your field. However, in this particular team that Wolfe is bringing, the Glimmora is actually more used, I would say, for the special damage and just for the unique coverage that it adds to this team. So, yeah, it's a little late for the Toxic Spikes to show up on the battlefield. But, hey, I mean, if you get... however many protects you need now for this Incineroar to be knocked out from the poison, then maybe you can win the 1v1.
Yeah, the tough thing here is, like, yeah, Marco can just go for Fake Out Sacred Sword, and the Glimmora can only knock out one of the two Pokemon, so you can either knock out the Chien-Pao, which you kind of have to, because if you don't knock it out, two Sacred Swords will KO you. If you target the Incineroar, well, then the Chien-Pao will be able to Sacred Sword you. But, I mean, the chip damage is slowly starting to add up with Spiky Shield, so, like, I just, like, still is probably not enough here because the Pokemon are relatively healthy.
Yeah, I'm saying...
This next turn, right, Glimmora gets to threaten 1 KO.
No, I'm saying you keep clicking Protect until Incineroar is knocked out by Poison, and then it's a 1v1. Yeah.
Yes, agreed. I think that's, like, the only approach, it feels like. Like, if you attack here, you just lose, right?
Yeah. Unless Marco can be kind of baited into clicking Icicle Crash, and that's like the kind of the thing.
Yes.
Like, what is more likely? Getting however many protects, and I guess, yeah, that's what Wolfe was going for, hoping for like a, I don't know, protect misplay, and is going for the Meteor Beam. However, yeah, Chien-Pao attacked, and so this plan fails, unfortunately, for Wolfe, and Incineroar will get the knockout here. And yeah, that should be the game, unless Marco decided to go for a parting shot. Let's see.
That would actually allow him to, yeah, just instantly, of course, lose the game, but it is knockoff going into Glimmora. I think if you're Marco, it's very safe to play the end game the way he did. He's like, look, like, I don't need to risk missing, and even though Sacred Sword is a 3-hit knockout into Glimmora, like, Glimmora is not going to be able to deal with all of my Pokemon. If it were faster than Chien-Pao, maybe it could have been a little bit more interesting, but of course it's not going to be. And so, yeah, really, really great play by Marco here. And it felt like the Steel Terra Urshifu was like the key defining factor in this, just being able to soak up what should be super effective attacks and then retaliate back with such huge surging strikes. Like, even if it wasn't getting the knockout onto Landorus, it was still doing so much damage.
Yeah, so much damage indeed. And I think just really, really exploiting this weakness on Wolfe's team, who I think after this definitely is going back to the drawing board a little bit with this team, and has to come up with, I think, a better way to handle especially this bulky Terra Steel Urshifu when paired up with dual Fake Out, because that was just so difficult for him to deal with. And then also, of course, Marco just showing how perfectly he was able to exploit this weakness and navigating this to knock out Wolfe from the tournament, and Marco will stay alive here.
Yeah, once again, I felt like the call with the Urshifu with the surging strikes in that first game, just knocking off Fluttermane, was like the defining turn of the set for me. Just really, really impressively done. And it just goes to show how powerful this Mystic Water Urshifu is, right? I think we're sometimes used to seeing Choice Scarf Urshifu, or also, of course, like a Water Terra Urshifu. But Mystic Water plus the double Fake Out plus the Steel Terra is nice, because in my head, like, this Urshifu is probably a little bit bulkier. Be really curious on like what its EV spread is, but being able to be bulky means that you don't have to invest as much in attack and speed, right? And so like the Urshifu, even without something like a Water Terror, with Mystic Water alone, is like strong enough to get the knockouts with surging strikes. And then with the double Fake Out, like just one bad turn into Urshifu means it can get a one-hit knockout potentially onto something. And so, I mean, like you talked about, Marcus, like there's a reason why Urshifu has been such a good Pokemon, and Marco made it look amazing in that one.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a little bit sad that we didn't get to see the Terra Dragon to come into more effect, because that, I think, could have been a cool way. But yeah, with the Chien-Pao, just the perfect partner for Urshifu all around. And like that, Marco will advance over Wolfe and will make it into the next round.